Russian girl flirts with lazy young man, but he pretends not to get anything. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. At a typical high school in Japan, a girl catches everyone's attention wherever she goes. Her name is Alisa Kujo, but everyone calls her Alya. With a Russian father, Alya not only has the highest grades in school, but also excels in sports. She is also the treasurer of the student council. All these qualities make Alya one of the most sought-after girls among her peers. One of those who couldn't resist her charm was Ando, a second-year student. Acting cool as always, he introduced himself and asked her out for lunch, but she declined without a second thought. To save some face, he asked if he could at least get her phone number, but she said no because she had no interest in him whatsoever. After humiliating the boy, to close the deal, she remarked that his necklace was against the school rules, living up to her role in the student council. After this little spectacle, people around were left wondering how this girl could reject the most desired guy in school so effortlessly. When Alya arrived in the classroom, she encountered the same interested looks from the boys she passed. Sitting at the back of the room, she greeted her friend Q's with a good morning, but he didn't wake up. So she kicked his chair and asked if he stayed up late watching anime again. He confessed that he was up until dawn debating with an otaku friend about the latest episode they watched. Acting all proper, Alya scolded him, saying he was an idiot for sacrificing his sleep for cartoons, leaving him tired and sleepy at school the next day. If being an idiot means professing your love for a work of art without being bound by time, then Q's accepted the insult gladly. Regardless, the boy couldn't help but yawn from exhaustion, and in one of those yawns, Alya said something in Russian to him. Q's asked what she said, and she explained that she called him pathetic. Not paying much attention, Q's noticed it was time for chemistry class, but since he didn't bring his materials, he asked to share with his friend. However, his sudden interest started fading as the teacher wrote words like estrogen, tungsten, and oxygen on the board. To prevent her friend from falling asleep again, Alya poked him in the ribs with a pen, making him impulsively raise his hand. The problem was that the teacher had just asked what the second most abundant chemical element in the universe was, leaving Q's in a tight spot. To help him out, Alya discreetly pointed to one of the elements on the periodic table, so Q's answered strontium. Disappointed, the teacher said the answer was wrong, and then asked Alya next. Cynically, she answered helium, which was correct, leaving Q's shocked at how terribly he had been tricked. After the embarrassment, Q's confronted her about the prank, but she pretended she had pointed to the right element. As he grew more agitated, she said something else in Russian. Once again, he asked what she had said, and she told him she called him an idiot. However, one thing Alya didn't know was that Q's understood Russian and that she had actually called him cute. When he was a child, he used to play with a Russian girl who lived near his grandfather's house, so he ended up learning quite a bit of the language back then. Curiously, it was the same language his wonderful Russian friend was using to flirt with him secretly. But to avoid embarrassing her and lacking the courage, Q's decided to keep it a secret. Sometime later, Q's decided to take out his phone, and the enforcer of useless matters reprimanded him, saying that phones were prohibited on school grounds unless it was an emergency. Q's replied that it was an emergency because a game was giving away a legendary character for free, but only for those who claimed it within 10 minutes. Alya confiscated his phone and saw that he had gotten Tsukuyomi, the moon goddess in Japanese mythology. The council member asked why Tsukuyomi had silver hair instead of black, but Q's didn't care about the hair color as long as the goddess remained beautiful. Hearing this, Alya felt a tinge of jealousy and returned his phone. She then said in Russian that she also had silver hair. Embarrassed, Q's asked what she said, and Alya claimed she called him an addict. Q's replied that he had to be an addict to compete because he was part of the lower ranks and had to earn his equipment through blood and sweat, unlike the rich kids who could have their parents buy them platinum armor. Fed up, Alya complained that she thought he was more serious than that, and Q's reflected internally that none of what he said was a joke. Later during lunch, Takeshi, one of Q's friends, was once again upset about not being popular with the girls. Paying little attention to his outburst, the boys at the table saw the student council members including Alya and her sister Maria, who was the council secretary, as well as Yuki, the spokesperson. The boys at Q's table commented on how beautiful these girls were, although Alya supposedly already had a boyfriend according to what she had said. Q's teased that even if she didn't take, she wouldn't stand a chance, so she admitted he was jealous because the guy was close enough to that goddess to call her by her nickname. Indifferently, Q's admitted it was true, but noted that the girl was always nagging him, though she thought that was better than being ignored, especially since Alya barely spoke to anyone else. This was why he preferred Suwoo, because she was much more open and communicative than Alya. The problem was that Suwoo rejected many students. While listening to this, Q's glanced at the girl, who looked back at him with a red face. Soon she approached and asked to sit at the table with Alya. When the two sat down, Suwoo was much more communicative as always, while her colleague maintained her usual stern expression. During lunch, Q's and the council spokesperson seemed to be getting along very well, making Alya feel that familiar jealousy. She asked if the two were friends. Suwoo explained that they had known each other since childhood and had studied together from preschool until now. Then the other two boys finished eating and went to return their trays, so Suwoo moved closer to Q's and asked if he had considered her offer to join the student council. However, as he said so many times before, the guy has no interest in this, so the girl insists he would be a great fit with her and Alya, especially since he has experience as vice president. Alya is surprised by this information, so Suwoo explains that Q's was her vice when they were in elementary school. Q's is quick to remind everyone that he only ran because the girl pestered him a lot as she needed a vice. With that said, Suwoo argues to her colleague that this guy knows how to get things done, and she responds in Russian that she knows this very well while finishing her can of Oshiruko. On the way out of school, Suwoo says goodbye to the two, and Alya takes the opportunity to express her surprise at seeing Q's talking like that with the girl, as she thought he had no friends. Q's then points his finger at Alya, implying that she is his friend. Questioning if they indeed are, Alya concludes they are after thinking for a bit, then leaves abruptly, saying she has matters to attend to in the student council room, leaving Q's there. Next we see a childhood memory of Q's where he played with the Russian girl who lived near his grandfather. Speaking in Russian, they admired the sunset together, and the girl corrected his words or completed his sentences when he didn't know what to say. When the sun sets, the girl bids young Q's farewell and gives him a tender kiss on the cheek. Q's wakes up at this moment, remembering that he studied Russian like crazy just to talk to this girl, but nowadays he doesn't even remember her name. The next day, as was common in this school, Q's and Alya were responsible for organizing the classroom before the first class. As he woke up very early because of the dream, he went to school way ahead of time to get things in order, so there was nothing left to do when his task partner arrived. Alya thinks it's going to rain because she's never seen this guy care so much about organization until Q's notices a stain on her sock. She explains that a truck splashed water on her and that it was also her fault for walking so close to the street. But anyway, she brought another pair of socks, so it's all good. Changing the subject, Alya also asks if Q's really isn't interested in joining the student council since he was a vice once. Not interested, Q's repeats that he doesn't want to, so Alya drops the subject and removes the dirty sock, making Q's turn away in embarrassment. From the smile the girl gives, it seems that was her intention. The next step of her plan was to cross her legs and ask the boy to fetch her spare sock from the locker, as she had already removed the dirty one and now couldn't step on the floor. With little patience, he agrees and fetches the sock, and the girl asks him to put it on her. This time he couldn't help but question what was going on, so she explains that it's a reward for getting the sock, and then she says in Russian that it's also a reward for herself. After yet another sudden confession from the girl in another language, Q's begins to wonder about her intentions with this kind of thing. Maybe she's tired of acting perfect for the whole school and uses him as a release valve. Anyway, as the girl pretended to call him a coward in Russian, he holds her foot and starts putting the sock on. Even after all her bravado, Alya backs down and says she's not ready for this, but Q's goes through with it for being called a coward. The problem is in the middle of it, he accidentally touches a place he shouldn't, so Alya kicks him in the face, leaving the warrior defeated and left to die alone at the back of the classroom. Hours later, the boy rises from the ashes to apologize, and Alya calls him leg pervert in Russian. However, she also apologizes for kicking him and tries to touch him to see if he's okay, but the boy loses it and ends up blurting that he should be thankful for the beautiful view granted to him during the kick. Immediately, Alya punches the young man and curses his family to the 5th generation in Russian, then runs off. To try to fix this mess, Kyu's chases after the girl throughout the school, but her physical education skills keep her at a distance. Furthermore, already in the courtyard, she jumps over the side rail of the corridor, leaving the guy eating her dust. 10 minutes later, the two are panting after the marathon they ran. Regaining his breath, Kyu's apologizes again and Alya acknowledges that she was partly to blame. To make up for it, the boy gives the girl a can of oshiruko, a drink she loves. Even though she makes a fuss initially, she ends up accepting it, and after taking a sip, she offers him some in Russian. Kyu's goes crazy at the possibility of an indirect kiss happening, but not wanting to reveal that he understands the language, he plays dumb once more. Alya teases him by saying in Russian that the guy doesn't understand anything she says, causing Kyu's to lose his composure completely. The day after Kyu's shows up to help with something Suwoo asked for, so he arrives asking what it's about. Suwoo scolds him for his lack of manners, saying the right thing to do would be to ask if she's been waiting long. He then sarcastically acts out what she requested, making Suwoo play along. Watching this with a sour expression, Alya comments that the two really do get along well, which embarrasses Kyu's. Gradually losing the joy in his eyes, Kyu's learns that he came to help organize the storage room. After some time, Suwoo asks him to fetch some board games from a higher shelf because apparently she doesn't know how to climb a ladder. Once he does, she explains that she uses these games for school festivals and also played them during the new student council meeting the other day. To make conversation, Kyu's asks who won and Suwoo responds that he's looking at the winner. Next to them, Alya asks for less chatter and more work. When Suwoo goes to do something in another corner, Alya repeatedly says in Russian that she wants attention, leaving Kyu's unsure how to react. After the storage room is organized, the students are surprised by the approach of Kanzaki, the student council president. Kanzaki comments that he's heard a lot about how talented Kyu's is, and the boy thanks him for the praise. At the same time, Kyu's observes that this guy really has a certain style, which must be why he's the school's superstar president. Whatever the case, he has nothing to do with it, so he bids farewell. But before he leaves, Kanzaki offers to pay for his dinner as a thank you for cleaning the storage room. Kyu's politely declines, but Suwoo insists because Kyu's won't have a ready dinner when he gets home. Kanzaki asks how she knows this about his life, and she reveals that they've been friends since childhood. Therefore, the president also invites the two girls. Later, after placing their orders, the four of them start a conversation. Suwoo highlights how amazing Kyu's is for handling physical work and paperwork like they're nothing, in addition to being a great master of ceremonies and negotiator. Kanzaki knows she doesn't usually speak so highly of others, so this guy must really have potential. With this in mind, the president invites Kyu's to join the student council, but for the 1000th time, the boy refuses, saying what he did in middle school was enough. Now he's tired of that kind of thing. Kanzaki agrees that the council involves a lot of work, but the reward is worth it. Being honest, he emphasizes that Kyu's participation in the council will have a huge impact on his job recommendations. Kyu's replies that he's not very ambitious, but Suwoo insists they should run together again. Kyu's argues that the girl will win the presidency with or without him, but she insists on having him by her side on this journey. Once again, he declines the invitation, this time with less patience. Kanzaki says that perhaps Suwoo isn't the best candidate considering that Alya is also running. When the Russian girl confirms this, Suwoo narrows her eyes in a challenging manner. Soon everyone's food arrives. After the meal, they all say their goodbyes, and Kanzaki says he will go with Suwoo in one direction and asks Kyu's to walk Alya home. The Russian girl refuses the company, but the boy doesn't want to leave her alone on the street at night. Along the way, he asks if she's really running for student council president, and she confirms it again without much patience. She then says she can walk the rest of the way alone and thanks him for his company. Upon reaching his doorstep, Kyu's notices women's shoes at the entrance and then sees a girl on the sofa reading a book. He asks what she's doing there. While talking about the book she's reading, she informs him that she'll be sleeping there tonight, even though the homeowner hadn't been informed. In the novel she's reading, she complains that the protagonist doesn't realize he's an older brother to one of the characters, and Kyu's finds it ironic that this girl is saying that as she pretends to everyone that she's his childhood friend. Surprised, Suwoo turns and asks if that's not true, since she and her brother have known each other forever and are close, so it makes sense. She then confirms that the older guy with the character is her brother. Kyu's Kyu's considers that maybe they're half-siblings or something like that, so Siwoo grabs him by the collar and responds that the story is only good because they're blood siblings. The next day, Siwoo wakes her brother up by annoying him, so he threatens to report her for domestic violence. With no other options, the girl promises to hide under his bed to pull his feet. Fed up, Kyu's tells his sister to get down, and she asks if it's because he'll end up with a tent pitched if she doesn't leave. Later, they watch a movie together called Space Girl Chiai, and Siwoo gets emotional seeing exclusive relationship scenes that never appeared on TV. Because of this, she wants to watch the movie again right then, but Kyu's brings her back to reality, reminding her they need to do some shopping. In a clothing store, Siwoo would love to buy a summer dress, but prefers to declare bankruptcy buying anime items. Kyu's finds it absurd that the fabric costs 15,000 yen, and the girl explains that women's fashion charges by the centimeter of fabric. Changing the subject, her brother comments that maybe a silver thing is spying on them, while Alya watches their interaction with a hateful expression. Siwoo says she noticed it long before, ever since they arrived on that floor, because she has a sixth sense for detecting the gazes of people she knows. Kyu's asks if she isn't ashamed to say something so ridiculous with such confidence, and she admits that she is, but without breaking character. Kyu's then wonders how he can resolve this until he looks back and sees his sister heading directly toward Alya. With no place to hide, the Russian girl pretends she stumbled upon them by chance at the mall, and they both pretend to believe her. She explains that she came to buy some clothes, so Siwoo invites her to join them for lunch. Kyu's is worried about taking her to that restaurant, and his sister remarks that he was eager for this to happen, surprising Alya. The Russian girl asks what's wrong with the restaurant, so Siwoo asks if she likes spicy food because that's the house specialty. Kyu's is more honest with his friend and warns her that the food there burns hotter than hell in summer without a fan, but Alya decides to go without hesitation. Upon arrival, and not for lack of warning, the restaurant's name is Hell's Cauldron, causing Alya's eyes to widen. Siwoo dismisses it as just a little spice, making the Russian girl frown, and Kyu's tries one last time to warn her that all hope should be abandoned if she decides to open the gates of hell. Regardless, Alya stands firm and doesn't back down. Once seated, she can't understand anything on the menu, so Siwoo explains that Blood Pool Hell is a ramen with a very red soup, the least spicy on the menu. Thorny Valley Hell makes it feel like your tongue is being dipped in acid. Alya asks about Infinite Hell, and Siwoo says she'd rather sleep in a dragon's stomach. Kyu's opts for the mildest dish because he doesn't want to experiment in an unfamiliar restaurant, and the two women follow suit. After placing their order, Alya comments on Siwoo's masculine outfit, and she explains that she's taking advantage of her day off to break her routine. To make things even more awkward, Siwoo mentions that she was in bed with Kyu's this morning, causing him to spit out his water and attract stares from the restaurant. His sister adds that she felt like wearing something different today, so she borrowed a shirt from him. On the verge of passing out, Alya asks Kyu's what that's all about, and he explains that this girl showed up at his house unannounced, entered his room, and jumped on his bed. To cool things down, the waiter brings a volcano in the form of food to the table, and Alya threatens to cancel, but swallows her fear and a bit of that noodle. Her soul is instantly cremated, but she pretends everything is fine when Kyu's asks. With that, the siblings enjoy the food and praise its quality until Alya starts tearing up and asking someone to kill her in Russian. Kyu's tells her she doesn't need to push herself, but she lies, saying it's great. Noticing the conversation, Siwoo takes the opportunity to offer Demon's Tear to spice up her dish further. Kyu's sees the malicious glint in his sister's eyes and realizes she's doing it on purpose, so he asks Alya not to add that spice, but she thinks a single drop won't make a difference. As soon as she tries the food with the extra heat, she wakes up in a park, not knowing how she got there. Kyu's informs her that Siwoo went to buy something and offers her an ice cream to soothe her. In the midst of this, he asks why she wants to be president, and she responds that she doesn't need a reason to aim for something big. She just wants it even though she doesn't have a running mate. Kyu's explains that she can only run with a vice president, so Alya decides to find someone to be her vice just on paper. In Russian, she confides that she wishes Kyu's would stand by her in this process, which touches him. This statement makes him recall an old moment when a girl was crying and apologizing to her parents behind a stage curtain. Distracted, the boy is invited invited to accompany Alya to a clothing store, but he thinks it requires more intimacy to advise a woman on what to wear. Internally, he reflects that Alya doesn't quite understand how friendships work, and understanding her perspective, he agrees to accompany her, making it clear that they are friends. At the store, Alya wonders why Q's suddenly started being nice to her and concludes that he feels sorry for her, thinking she has no chance of being elected president. Convinced of this, she angrily says she'll change and promises to show who's boss with her fashion show. Worried about the chance of him hearing her change, she tells him to leave, which he does. Feeling more secure, she puts on the dress she picked out and likes the result. Before leaving the changing room, she's afraid he won't react, but pushes that aside and shows off her outfit. People around praise the girl's beauty, and Q's comments that the dress highlights Alya's elegance and femininity, making her even more beautiful than she already is. Disbelieving what she just heard, she closes the curtain and freaks out over being praised more than she expected, while Q's is also unsure of what he said outside. Noticing the boy's talent for compliments, the Russian girl thinks he must have practiced with Siwoo, so she puts on a more masculine outfit to compete with her. Once again, Q's praises her with his excellent rhetoric, leaving her even more flustered. Addicted to receiving compliments, she tries on the entire store for her friend to see. For the grand finale, she puts on the most daring outfit she's worn so far, but when she opens the curtain, Siwoo is next to Q's, so she closes the curtain and says something in Russian. Siwoo asks what she said, and Q's explains that she seems to want to die, so his sister mocks the Russian girl. Taking the subway home, the siblings say goodbye, leaving Alya alone with her embarrassed thoughts. Putting that aside, she wonders why the two got off at the same station. When she gets home, the Russian girl is greeted warmly by her older sister Masha. Alya reveals that she met Q's and his childhood friend, prompting Masha to comment that her sister always gets irritated when it comes to that boy. She understands that Alya has finally found someone who truly moved her heart. Alya doesn't like this comment and downplays it, arguing that she doesn't see the boy that way. Many years ago in Vladivostok, Russia, the teacher asks the students to form groups and write about local shops, with the best group winning a prize. Excited, the children begin forming teams, and Alya's classmates decide to write about the clothing store and the bakery, leaving her to handle the butcher shop and the florist. Being competitive, Alya wants to come in first. When she arrives at the florist, she tells the owner that she is doing a school project and needs to study his shop. Later, she stops by the butcher shop and does the same. The next day, when presenting what she did to her friends, none of them had done anything, so Alya scolds the boys, saying that such a report is lengthy. However, since they have a week's deadline, her classmates believe they have plenty of time. Frustrated, Alya insists it won't be enough time. The boys take her notebook and see that she is taking the project very seriously. The other girl in the group anxiously asks if they have to read all of it, which makes Alya even angrier. The whole group starts arguing over this, and the teacher has to intervene. Staying late at school, Alya refuses to give in and continues to focus on her work, further developing her notes. A week later, when the results are announced, Group B emerges victorious, leaving Alya devastated despite all her effort. Returning home that day, she reflects that she would have won if only her group members had been as serious as she was. At the same time, she concludes that she shouldn't expect much from others, since she feels no one is as motivated as she is. With teary eyes, she decides that if that's the case, she'll do everything on her own. Years later in Japan, her new classmates ask if she passed that super difficult transfer exam, and she proudly says yes. The students ask how she speaks Japanese so well, and she explains that she lived in the country 5 years ago. When the bell rings and class begins, Alya looks over and sees a boy who slept through all the noise, so she wakes him to let him know the bell rang. Lazily, Q's asks if she is the girl who gave the speech at the opening ceremony, so she formally introduces herself enthusiastically. Q's also says his name, but without much grace. Stretching, he's happy to see that Hikaru is in the same class as him, and even happier to find that Takeshi is there too. In science class, Q's forgets his notebook at home and shares with a friend. During physical education, he runs as if he's carrying lead weights in his underwear. In math class, the only counting he does is of sheep while he dreams. Seeing all this, Alya realizes that even the most prestigious schools have their share of lazy students. Later, with 14 days until the school festival, it was decided that the theme would be Haunted House. Hikaru and Takeshi rack their brains trying to figure out how to get costumes for the ghosts, while Alya sews some in her corner. corner. After the last bell rings, some classmates tell her it's time to go home, but the Russian girl wants to stay late, dedicating herself to the task. After they leave, Alya overhears the girls commenting that it's just a festival and shouldn't be taken so seriously. This makes her feel like the present is repeating the past from the days when she would get indignant in the cloudy streets of Russia. Lost in her memories, she pricks her finger and watches the blood ooze out. Nevertheless, she doesn't intend to give up, even if it means being alone. Suddenly, Q's arrives in the room looking for her and asks her to go home because he got a document showing that the Handicrafts Club offered to help with the festival costumes after he had the former student council president pull some strings. Therefore, Alya no longer needs to work on them as everything is already arranged, and there's no need for her to do it all alone. Annoyed, she responds that she just wants the festival to be good. As she speaks, she starts to cry and get more agitated, claiming that people don't pay as much attention to these things as she does. Finally, she asks if she's doing something wrong, to which Q's replies that she's putting effort into the wrong things because school activities aren't meant to be done alone, but rather to foster a sense of teamwork among students to create something together. Not knowing what to say, Alya packs up her things and leaves. Hurrying through the corridors, she wonders what that boy has in his head. The next day, Takshi presents his pre-festival project, an event just for them that will include a hide-and-seek game and a courage test in the school premises. With 6 days left until the event, everyone works together to build every detail, and Alya gets excited when she receives her well-made ghost costume, even starting to socialize with her classmates more casually. Soon, the big day of the Serai Autumn Festival arrives, and all the participants take their positions to give their best after so much effort in setting everything up. After the event, their class wins the prize for the best attraction at the festival, and at night, the students gather for the post-festival folk dance. Alya sees Q's and asks to sit next to him, so he assumes she doesn't know how to dance since she decided to sit there instead of participating, considering any boy would love to dance with her. With a serious expression, she mentions that she practiced ballet as a child, so this easy dance wouldn't be a problem for her. However, she refused to dance with all the guys because she didn't want to bother. Q's comments that it must be tough to reject so many people, but she notes that she's used to it. That's when the boy understands why they call Alya the Ice Princess. The girl is bothered by the nickname, but only the princess part, as it makes her seem like one of those snobby privileged kids. Of course, she was born with above average looks and talent according to herself, but she couldn't survive on just that. Looking at the bandages on her fingers, she confesses that it irritates her when her effort is ignored, and people only value other things. Given this, Q's proposes asking everyone not to call her that anymore, and the girl thanks him. In the end, she acknowledges that she would never have experienced the school festival this way if she had done everything alone, and, taking advantage of the moment, apologizes for getting mad at Q's that day. Q's didn't see it as a big deal, especially since Alya put in much more effort than he did, for example. But the girl insists on making it up to him somehow. So, he asks if there's a Russian custom where people give each other special nicknames. Until then, he had only called the Russian girl by her last name, Kujo. When she responded that her family calls her Alya, he asks to call her that as a reward. Alya asks what he gains from that, and he claims he'll be the only one to call the prettiest girl in school by her nickname. Speaking of which, a few boys appear to invite the Ice Princess to the dance, leaving her embarrassed with so many people insisting. Seeing his new friend in trouble, Q's pulls Alya away and tells the others that this girl is already taken. As Q's pulls her toward the dance, the girl feels her heart about to explode, and since she said a simple dance like this would be easy, the boy asks her to show if she was serious. The next day, as usual, Alya looks at her friend sleeping in class with a disdainful expression. When he wakes up, she tells him he's a waste of space. In Russian, she says that just because he was nice to her last night doesn't mean things will change. After Alya tells the whole story, Masha is happy with a love story between the two, which irritates the older sister because one thing has nothing to do with the other. To the older sister, it's clearly a love story like in the movies, where a friendship grows into a romance. Looking at the pendant she got from Sa, her boyfriend, Masha claims it was the same for her, especially when the boy saved her from a dog attack. Nervous, Alya tells the girl to brag about her love life elsewhere. The next day, in the student council room, Q's is greeted by the council president, Kanzaki, as he was called to help Yuki. At that moment, a girl introduces herself as Alisa Kujo, Alya's older sister and student council secretary. However, she prefers to be called Masha because a friend of her sister is also a friend of hers. Saying this, she holds the boy's hand and says it's a pleasure to meet him. In that gesture, she feels something different in her heart and asks Q's given name. He responds that it's Masachika, which means together with diplomacy. The girl snaps out of it and apologizes for her behavior, then invites the boy to join her, but in Russian. Although he understood, he keeps pretending not to. So Masha repeats the request in Japanese. Later, in a gift shop, Masha falls in love with a plush cat that looks like Alya. According to her, Q's looks disgusted, but the girl believes it's a great idea to buy plushies that resemble each student council member. Q's agrees that the girls will love it, but wonders how the president would look among those toys. Ignoring his opinion, Masha begins her search for a plushie that looks like Kanzaki. Q's tries to stop her, but gives in when she shows him a lion with glasses that looks exactly like the president. Despite this, he insists it's not a good idea to buy those things. So Masha gives up, but decides to take the first kitten she saw anyway. Worried, Q's asks her not to put that toy on the same receipt or her sister, the treasurer, will get annoyed. Leaving the store, the boy notices Alya's sister's oddity and wonders if she's always like that. If so, it explains why Alya also seems a bit off. Sometime later, Masha arrives at the tea shop and gives her sister in plush form to the boy, who doesn't know how to react. According to her, the two look great together, so much so that she decides to take a picture of this unique moment. But Q stops her by placing a bag in front of the camera. Inside the tea shop, Masha asks Q's opinion on a product, but he warns he knows nothing about it. Internally, he reflects that his sister, Yuki, could help a lot with this since their mother taught her a lot about it. Remembering their childhood, when their parents separated, Q's decided to live with his father. But Yuki, who was ill, stayed with their mother. Seeing the boy was distressed, Masha gives him a caring hug, making Q's feel something different inside, until the tea she was holding burns the boy's back. In shock, Masha drops the cup while the Alya plushie seems to observe the scene.